There is an expression that echoes throughout the text, which is very beautiful, recognizing ourselves as spiritual seekers. One aspect that I appreciated in this book, but also in other things you have written, is that you also have the courage to create a genealogy of all those voices that have contributed to this path. So you mentioned Welblack, Taab, you mentioned Jacopone, the poet of moderation, but also of great nothingness, Peggy, Leopardi, of course, but it's also something I've seen and discovered myself relatively recently while reading Giussani. And yet, while I was reading this part where at a certain point you both open up personally about your own journeys, an episode came to mind that I'd like to share with you. When I was 20, I was a university student. I went through a crisis. I'd read, I'd searched, I'd discussed things. But one day I was at the university residence where I lived. And I met someone who was important to me. He was simply walking up the stairs. And I asked him, "How are you?" And he turned to me and said, "Fantastic, really great." And he said it with a big, genuine smile. And for me, the fact that someone could say things were going great, that life was truly beautiful, was really a turning point during that time. Why am I telling you this? Because when you share your personal stories of conversion, or of the beginning of your journey of faith, you truly talk about deeply human aspects. The cherry trees in bloom during that extremely difficult time moved me deeply. So this is exactly what I would like to ask you, to talk about how, in the smallness of our own experience, both personally and as a community, just as that teacher did for me when, at a certain point, simply by telling me that life was beautiful, opened up a new path for me, we too can take on this responsibility of being witnesses, which is something much less abstract and theoretical than we might think. Sometimes all it really takes is meeting someone and smiling at them.
But in my opinion, this is the real challenge, isn't it? Because when you meet someone, it means you're encountering a person who has gone through their own human journey, right? And who goes but lives in the same world you lived in. And while you're there, confused, in crisis, fumbling around, not knowing which way to turn, you meet someone who's living in their own situation, just like yours, but they live it with such positivity and joy that it leaves a mark on you to the point that you start to desire something similar, right? That's what happened to me, even when I met Father Giussani, because I had gone to the seminary when I was young. No one could say that I hadn't taken seriously the proposal that had been made to me. But many times, I felt that there was something in the way I was present in reality, that I didn't have this freedom, this ability to be in the midst of challenges with the peace and joy that your friend had. Or I saw others who lived with this attitude. That's why if I was interested in the proposal that Don Giussani was making, it was precisely for this reason. I've always said since then that from the moment I met him, I was able to embark on a human journey, because I saw that by putting into practice what he proposed, it allowed me not to be determined or to be less and less determined by this fear or this state of existential insecurity. And so I've increasingly seen that it was possible in this situation to follow a path that would allow for the formation of a person, which is what you were talking about, right? That I can stand before diversity without fear, with a joy and a freedom that before I couldn't even have dreamed of. So, who can communicate this? As you were saying, right? It can be communicated by someone who has gone through this journey, right? Because, you see, so in the end, what can we really, a father, a parent, what can they actually communicate to their child? The experience they have Because just like your children, by watching you, right, they see how you react to the news on television, to the difficulties you encounter at work, to the challenges of society, of your life. They see you living together as a family. We too, no matter what context we live in, we bear witness to our fear, our uncertainty, our ability to face reality with a kind of freedom that we don't see in others. What can we communicate? We can only communicate what we have lived and are living through in our own experience, because that's what we need today. Yeah, as Paul VI already said, we don't just need teachers but witnesses, right? Who can show us that it is possible, even in this world, as it was for you, to live differently. And unfortunately, today we don't find many of these people, because the problem of education is not a problem of the young, it's a problem of adults. With the example you shared, just like the one I told, what is it that saved us? Having seen quite an adult who could face reality with a solidity, with a certainty that we wished for ourselves. This is what stirs up the envy to become like them, the desire to become like them. This is the starting point of an educational drive, because it's as if reawakening, it touched the burning point of the person, you know? And this is what if we have an experience, can communicate in the face of the current difficulties of young people, which we were discussing earlier, so that they can see in front of them people who are not devalued here and there, caught in between from the situation we live in, but who can live with a certainty that they haven't even dreamed of finding yet.
Yes, at a certain point it is said, it's not true that more of God means less humanity, and vice versa. Right at the heart of the book, we come to this awareness that the first revolution is the one within ourselves, and there is also a beautiful and truly comforting part where the themes of happiness, desire, and freedom are addressed. However, the aspect of this book that I find important, the political aspect, is that the revolution that happens within us, if we focus on that fear, make it human and allow it to bring about a change in us, then in fact, that change of heart, which is personal, becomes a change for the whole world. And so, for example, at a certain point, the themes of ecumenism, peace and the future are addressed. But the premise, which I believe is truly methodological, is what you say at a certain point, right? Because it's clear, all of us have the perception of living in a historical moment where the urgencies are truly, in the worst sense of the word, apocalyptic. Something that really seems to have stripped us of the ability to stop a history that is moving in a certain direction. And at a certain point you say some words that are initially disorienting but also comforting. I am certainly aware of the many urgencies that characterize today's reality. At the same time, however, I am not in a hurry to find an immediate solution, because it seems to me that the human journey requires time to reach maturity. And furthermore, what makes life truly life is the growth of the person. But in order to mature, one needs to encounter reality, to face a variety of situations and learn to judge them. This is what makes us become adults. That's why we shouldn't be in a hurry to get there. Why am I bringing up this passage to you? Because for me it was the source of an important question, you know? Because the risk is that, even with good intentions, we end up giving in to a logic that belongs to the world.
It seems to me that what you're saying is really quite crucial, because I was just recently at a meeting, you know, with several people. The schools of Monza, with the minister, Valdizara, and a student asked me, he said he wishes that the things he learns, the things that happen in life, could leave something behind, a mark within himself, because otherwise everything just goes by without leaving even a trace. And I always remember this line from Eliot that says, "But where is the life we have lost in living?" Because the problem is that so often the things we experience leave no trace, and so we end up wasting time living because they don't have the ability to shape the person we are. And this, young people feel this as especially urgent because so often they sense that nothing remains, nothing that has the ability to last. Last year, I was really struck by one of my students, a girl, and I said to her, "Tell me something, Georgia. Yesterday they gave me a tip at my job. A 17-year-old girl who studies at a vocational school and works to earn a bit of money." She says, "Cool. Why do you think they gave you a tip?" "Well, because I put in a lot of effort. I gave it my all to serve, to pay attention to everything my customers needed." And I said, "Look, when you were there, were you just looking at your phone to see when your shift would end, or were you really caught up in that way of working, actually enjoying it?" And I didn't even remember my phone or the time. I said, with all the hours you have to work in your life, if you start enjoying it the way you did last night, you'll already, when you've earned the tip and enjoyed yourself, then the tip comes, it'll be like the cherry on top of the cake. He looks at me all serious and says, "Prof, in me, everything resets." In other words, nothing remains. This was true. And 2 weeks later, I brought it up again because I was so struck by the idea that a girl could realize that so many of the beautiful things that happen in life don't actually shape her as a person, don't teach her anything, that nothing of what they experience really remains, that I had already told at least 20 people about it. That's how much it struck me. But 2 weeks later, she came back and said, "Do you remember what word you told me?" "Nothing. Not even the episode. I mean, it's not that beautiful things don't happen, but it's as if nothing remains." Why? Because no one has taught her a method that helps her use everything that happens to her in order to grow. That's why I've told, I don't know, maybe 100 times a story that happened to me once with two girls in Barcelona who, while we were talking about these things, I asked, "But do you, Nela, since you're at the end of high school, do you have any certainties about mathematics that you could share with your little 6-year-old sister?" Of course. And about life? Silence. How many hours of math have you had compared to life? In just a few hours of math, they managed to gain some certainties. In so many hours of life, almost nothing to share. And I say, why do you think that is? Because in mathematics, a method is taught that allows you, little by little, through comparison, through the exercises you do, in comparison with the teacher, you can learn a method. But in life, no one has taught you a method that you can learn from. And so, in the end, you have nothing to communicate with certainty about life. While we were talking about this, the mother, the lady who was hosting me there in Barcelona, arrives and says to these girls, do you know what my daughter Claudia asked me? Mom, is life always like this? 6 years old. Do you have anything to say to this girl? Nothing. That is, if we can't offer you a method, as I was saying to this young man, responding to this guy from Monza, if you don't, just as you ask your teachers to teach you a method for learning mathematics, if you don't also ask that at the same time as they teach you a method for learning mathematics, you learn a method that then allows you to learn from the things that happen to you in order to shape your own person. Nothing remains. And so in the end, people are not created. And I think this is one of the fundamental challenges, because what saved me was precisely this ability to learn from everything that happened to me. Why? Because someone suggested to me the method of comparing everything with the need I have to live, seeing when life truly meets all my needs. And when, even by making mistakes, you realize that this doesn't help you respond to life. If you don't make this constant comparison, like the girl did with the tip, if everything is reset, in the end you always end up back at the beginning. And so we find ourselves increasingly frightened, increasingly empty, because it leaves no trace. And this, it seems to me, is one of the most serious challenges we face as a society, because now no one can indoctrinate anyone about anything, because it's pointless. But if we can challenge a person to become aware of what emerges in their experience, that makes them understand where life flourishes and where life becomes empty, where they, the person, grow, and where the person remains stuck without making any progress, and where everything becomes part of an enrichment, and when everything is wasted. If it isn't like this, in me, this world, where there is no evidence of anything, in the end, nothing remains as something that can convince people. And here we truly face a historic challenge, because if we can't help people grow, there will be more and more people disconnected from reality, more violent, more unable to fit into reality, with more violence inside, not because they're bad, but because no one has ever made them a proposal that would help them become increasingly able to see what is actually in their best interest, so they can live life better and enjoy it without needing to do foolish things or acts of violence or the kinds of incidents we read about in the news every day, ruining their own lives and those of others.
I have two final prompts. The first comes from a real now episode. Before Easter, I did a civic education activity with my class, and I took a risk. We talked about conflicts around the world. So, of course, we also talked about what is happening in the Holy Land. At a certain point, one student, they had to produce some written work, and then we were supposed to discuss them together. One boy writes, a very thoughtful boy, with an important idea. They kill in the name of God. And then after his comment, a girl said, well, if they don't forgive each other, there will be no way out. In this book, at a certain point, you also address the theme of ecumenism, of the relationship with the other. At a certain point, you say, recognize the seed of truth that we find in the other. And I think that's a reflection we're all having, isn't it? And yet, I believe it also allows us to better highlight what is truly the great value that Christ taught us, which is forgiveness. So I believe that we all feel powerless in the face of what is happening, of how times are changing. Here you actually provide an example of dialogue between worlds, one another, even different ones, that nevertheless come out of it strengthened, come out enriched. I really want to ask you, though I know it's a weighty question, how can we truly make this gift, the gift of forgiveness that Christ brought to earth, flourish in a time when it really seems like things are heading in a completely different direction?
It is only through the experience of having been forgiven. No one can forgive if they have not been forgiven. Jesus said it, to those who have been forgiven much, it is because of this that they love much. Jesus says this to the sinful woman who washes his feet, responding to the Pharisee who thinks that Jesus is unaware of who the woman washing his feet really is. But I think that the ultimate root of this, to really face this all the way, is not even forgiveness, even though it is important. Because forgiveness is the response to a mistake we have made. But if we do not find an answer to the real question of living, what is the question of living? We see it in the Samaritan woman, in the dialogue between Jesus and the Samaritan woman. Just to give an example, first it's not that Jesus isn't aware that the Samaritan woman had had five husbands who were in her. But to Jesus, what matters to him is to quench that woman's thirst. And that woman's thirst, what did it mean? The thirst for fulfillment. Because if she doesn't find the answer to her thirst for fulfillment, she will keep looking for another husband because she can't live without it. Even if she is forgiven again, if the problem can't be solved unless the person finds such a sense of fulfillment that she no longer needs to do foolish things to look for something she still hasn't found. That's why if Jesus doesn't answer the problem of fulfillment, of life, of the urgency of living, what good is it for a person to gain the whole world if they lose themselves? If he doesn't answer this question that he himself posed, and if he doesn't answer the question, what can truly bring satisfaction to life? What endures over time? I think that Jesus' answer would not be credible. And it amazes me, looking at what we are now, hearing in the liturgy, the example of the dialogue that broke out with the multiplication of the loaves, as recounted in the Gospel of St. John. Because there, Jesus began to respond to the problem of those who were there listening, and he didn't want to send them home, poor things, without giving them something to eat. After the multiplication of the loaves, they are so satisfied that they seek him out to make him king. In other words, they recognize him. But Jesus feels a kind of passionate impulse for the people and says to them, look, man does not live by bread alone. He had answered their hunger. But he knows very well that our hunger, just like our thirst, cannot be solved simply by multiplying loaves. And so he begins to raise the bar. Look, if you do not eat the flesh of the Son of Man and do not drink his blood, if you do not let yourselves be filled with the life that I bring you, you cannot have life within you. But the more Jesus raises the stakes, no, this is too much. This is crazy. But who can claim to bring the life that we are unable to achieve with any of our own efforts? And so all those who were seeking him abandoned him. That's why I say, if Jesus had not challenged them, even at the risks of being left alone, as happened even among the 12, if he did not challenge the person who is searching for fulfillment in this way, even to the point of risking that everyone might leave as they did, he would not be credible, because he would not have faced the great drama of life, which is there something that can fill life? This thirst for fulfillment. There is someone who can fill it. Because if there is no answer, we will keep doing wrong. We will keep searching for fulfillment elsewhere. We will keep feeling the need for forgiveness. But in the end, we will never truly resolve life. Jesus, on the other hand, says, this is the difference for the disciples who have begun to have a different experience of living. And when Peter, who at a certain point asked Jesus, but we have left everything and followed you, what will we get? One might think, but Peter, isn't it right in front of you that he is the one who gives you life? But did Peter still not understand that? Now, when everyone left him after the multiplication of the loaves, Peter, who had already been on a journey and truly understood the significance of his friend Jesus' presence, do you also want to leave? No one is spared this question, not even those who stay. Because it wouldn't be a passion for their destiny if they didn't understand this. And so, here we see Peter's journey. But where would we go? Only you have words that fill life. For this reason, if we don't have this experience of fullness, it will be difficult to be able to value the other. The crumb of truth that the other has, because we will all be trying to impose something, to seek something, to give ourselves to feel the emptiness. Only someone who lives from this fullness can be able to value everything just as Jesus did. Without this, we are simply searching for a fulfillment that we have not yet found and cannot find. And so all we do is try to assert our own navel. And this is the origin of so many arguments, which, as is the case most of the time, are absolutely pointless, which don't give us anything that fills our lives. They simply show that we haven't managed to find something capable of answering the hunger and thirst that each of our hearts feels.
Peggy says that in order to hope, one must have received the great grace, We are living in a time of grace, in any case. We are in the city of Leo XIII. We have all witnessed the joy that has come to meet us. Today there was the meeting with the College of Cardinals of the new pontiff, Leo XIII. The speech was delivered again. I am going to read a passage that, in my opinion, is important. Pope Francis has masterfully recalled and updated its contents in the Apostolic Exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, in which I would like to highlight some fundamental points. The return to the primacy of Christ in proclamation, the missionary conversion of the entire Christian community, growth in collegiality and synodality, attention to the sensus fidi, especially in its most authentic and inclusive forms such as popular piety, the loving care of the least and the marginalized, and courageous and confident dialogue with the contemporary world in its various components and realities. And then he continues like this, and precisely because I felt called to continue along this path, I thought of taking the name Leo XIV. There are several reasons, but mainly because Pope Leo XIII, in fact, with the historic encyclically Rerum Novarum, addressed the social question in the context of the first great industrial revolution. And today the Church offers everyone its heritage of social doctrine to respond to another industrial revolution and to the developments of artificial intelligence, which bring new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor.
When I hear about all these things we have to do, I ask myself, who is the one who will do them? And I say, all of this is the great mission that lies before all of us, right? As Christians. But no one can give what they do not have. All of this could be possible, right? That we might be able to make this emerge almost from the depths of our life experience, this possibility of being present in reality in this way, if we, as Christians in the Church, live an experience capable of generating this subject who is able to do this. If we do not have this, then even the most well-intentioned appeals will not find any foothold within us, because they can be reduced to a good wish that will never come to fruition unless the person capable of engaging at this level is brought forth. From there, we move to artificial intelligence, because in order to draw out all the novelty, all the richness that artificial intelligence offers, you need someone who is capable of asking the right questions. It takes a zest for life and an ability and a creativity to draw out from this vast, boundless library that artificial intelligence will become. You have questions. So, we return to the previous point. In my view, the real issue is that our society, at every social, cultural, and religious level, faces a challenge, the formation of the person. Without this, all these things will just be ideals. Desires, hopes. But it will be difficult for us to live in reality without fear, with this ability to engage in dialogue with the least among us, to value anything, to respond to the needs of others, if we are not living from a place of fullness. Because the whole Christian experience is born from richness, from gratitude for what Pegai spoke about. To have hope. And to be able to have hope in this world, one must have been touched by a great grace. If this great grace is not the generation of such a person, I think it will be difficult to have a hope that is able to take root within us.
In the book, I didn't underline anything. You know, I usually avoid underlining. I take notes instead. But I did underline these 3 lines. I think we are facing a challenge that could represent an opportunity. We didn't go looking for it ourselves. This is a calling that comes from reality, and we cannot glimpse the plan that lies behind it. We discover this to the extent that we engage with reality. Secularization, paradoxically, is an opportunity because it is calling me. It is calling everyone to a greater awareness about the nature of being human. Thank you. Well, let's invite our bishop.
I have a very tough job to wish everyone good night. And I do so. Just 2 days ago, we were all, in a way, with our eyes and our hearts in St. Peter's Square. We were there with our questions, as Alessandra mentioned earlier, with our desires, with our expectations. And I think we were all deeply moved. And what surely struck us is that the square, that square which represents us, erupted with joy before a person whom no one knew, but recognized that someone could be a guide, a point of reference, and help us find a way to answer these questions. Tonight it is the same square. It is not a different square. And tonight it is filled with many people who, with their questions, their expectations, their restlessness, are also willing to be witnesses that the path exists. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you. Thank you.